Jim, speaking of money.
Yes.
There's someone who spends a lot of money on wrestling, and that's Tony Khan. We're going to get to AEW Dynamite first, because there's a lot to talk about, and quite frankly, the listener demand just overnight has been more than usual, which is surprising. I thought last week would have been the peak.
I am trending again because their program was rotten.
But before we get to Dynamite, which may or may not be rotten, we'll find out what you think. You may have spoiled the review, but we're going to get there in a moment. You may remember a few weeks back, Jim, I played you some audio of the Young Bucks. July 10th, 2019, talking to Chris Van Vliet in advance of AEW.
Back when they were the younger Bucks.
They did not want photos of empty seats. They had all these plans for what arenas they were going to use. Big towns, big buildings. Small towns, small buildings. Here's Tony Khan from just over 5 years ago, April 24th, 2019, talking to Chris Van Vliet.
Now, wait a minute. Just April 2019, just over 5 years ago, this would have been, well, I guess I can't say, less than 6 months after I signed my NDA with Tony to not discuss whatever we discussed at that time. So he was still all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed about this thing.
Well, this is a version of Tony Khan people may forget now, but very neat, very buttoned up, glasses, very...
hair combed?
Yeah, I was about to say, I mean, not unkempt hair. His hair is kempt. He looks...
it was a very kempt young man back then.
He looks serious. He looks like a serious person, but let's hear what he was saying 5 years ago, before we review Dynamite, about the 5-year plan for AEW. Here's Tony Khan talking to Chris Van Vliet. Jim, stop me when you need to.
So obviously, you're a business guy, a very successful one. When you look ahead, you probably got a 5-year plan. What's the 5-year plan for AEW?
The 5-year plan for AEW is that we will have built up a brand, we will have built up a roster, we will have established ourselves as a top brand in wrestling for people who want fast-paced, exciting action and want a product that is more of a sporting-based product. I've talked a lot about how I want wins and losses to matter, because at the end of the day, that's why you're having the match. There's going to be a winner and a loser, and it matters, and it should.
Well, let's stop there.
Okay, I was about to say stop, because yes, obviously, and this is what he was saying. He said this publicly. This doesn't violate any non-disclosure agreement. A sports-based presentation. Wins and losses matter. And then he's the booker that literally brings in people that he pays 7 figures a year to and beats them on television the first time you see him. This is the same guy that fucking the sports-based presentation, that there has never been a more ludicrous parody of fake wrestling exposed on a national basis to the mainstream than the company that he said was going to be a sports-based presentation. The WWE in its worst moments has never done the phony level of bullshit on his fucking program over the last 5 years. Because it sounded good in his head with the numbers and everything that, you know, Randy Orton's got voices in his head that counsel him and talk to him. Well, Tony's got numbers flying around in his head. They don't always go together in a proper sequence, but he's got numbers flying around in his head.
Well, let's go back to the head or the mind of Tony Khan.
It should matter to your standing in the company, and it should matter to your standing in the chase for the championship, which at the end of the day is what everyone's trying to attain. I mean, we're here in an NFL stadium, and obviously all of us were chasing the AFC championship. We're chasing the AFC South championship at first, and then we want the AFC championship, and then we want the Super Bowl. And I think in wrestling, you know, there's championships, there's contenders, and I think that you know, the wins and losses are the building blocks for that. And across our matches, I think you're going to see a different presentation than you've ever seen before. I don't want to compare it to anybody else's.
Let me stop it.
Now,
there.
hold on. I will say that I agree with that last statement he just made, but the previous stuff, in all seriousness and all honesty, go back and listen to everything he said about here's what we're going to be. He sounds like a window salesman. He's giving you basic knowledge. Yes, anybody could fucking say, yes, it needs to be energy efficient and it needs to do this and it needs to do that. But try to get the fucking window salesman to actually be the one to put the fucking window in. You end up with a big old hole in your fucking house. He's saying stuff that's logical, that anybody that he's read on the internet, that other people have said. But it's no insight into how I'm going to be the one to do this myself. That's the problem.
Well, let's go back to the problem.
I think in mixed martial arts, I think UFC has done some outstanding things in how they present their fights. There have been some great things in the world of boxing. And then there are just some different things. For sports media partners across.
Have we seen anything reminiscent of boxing or the UFC?
No.
Across a number of sports and across the biggest media partners, I own a company based out of Boston called True Media that is the top sports engineering and analytics services company. And we support teams and media partners across a number of sports and present information in different ways, infographics, and utilizing databases to track a number of different things for these networks for their stats.
He can't even explain what his own fucking company is doing. Did that explain to, if you went into some team and said, here's what we can do for you, and they said that, what would you fucking do? We can track a number of things. Well, what are those things, and what good is it to me? How am I applying this? Does Tony own the company, or is he the window salesman, or is he the guy putting the fucking windows in?
Yeah, how much time is he spending in Boston running that company in the last 5 years?
Well, that's what I'm saying. I could buy a goddamn restaurant. That doesn't mean I can cook. But as long as somebody else that can is running the restaurant, we're all right.
Yeah, by the way, if that analytics company is doing any work for AEW and telling them that everything's on the rise and everything's good and everything's great, what does that tell you?
Hey, no, they need somebody named Freud to fucking analyze AEW. That's the analysis that needs to be done there. Somebody needs to be laid down on a couch. Go ahead.
Groups. And I think that what we can do in wrestling is offer fans, first of all, more engagement with what's happening in ring than there has been before, as far as like tracking the performances of wrestlers across matches, tracking the history of wrestlers, and really I think it's just going to be, like I said, it'll be a very different presentation. There's some things I probably can't explain yet, but there are going to be a lot of really, really
interested to hear what he could explain yet.
Exciting elements to it that, like I said, it would be very different than anybody's ever tried to present it before in a sporting environment.
Well, that's the end of it, and it really makes you wonder if he thought the wins and losses and the statistics and the rankings were really going to work. They abandoned it pretty quickly, all things considered.
Well, because you can't do that for everyone in every match, or then invariably half your roster at least looks like a bunch of fucking flunkies and losers, right? You utilize it when it's a positive for certain individuals, or people are on a streak, or people are so-and-so gunning for a title, whatever, but not just everybody across the board. And secondly, Tony, again, he abandoned one thought he had for another thought that he had. He thought this was going to be a national cable television version of his E-Fed, and his E-Fed fans would just multiply exponentially, and everybody would be more interested in the numbers and the wins and losses. That's part of the sports-based presentation, is parsley. And he thought that was the attraction because he's the numbers nerd. And he thought that everybody was going to be following closely on this fucking middle card guy's record or whatever to see if he's going to be rematched in a callback from a match in New Japan from 7 years ago. Because there's also going on with Tony that gives him a savant-like memory for small details like that. Despite the fact of him apparently being a busy boy with the football and the soccer and the sports company in Boston and all this other stuff. But the sports-based presentation was the antithesis of what the people that he was getting into business with, the EVPs, except for Cody, potentially, were all about and could possibly even pull off to begin with, which is why it always didn't make a goddamn lot of sense. It would be like me saying I'm going to open up a wrestling promotion and hiring all fucking boxers. Is complete opposite from what you're saying to who you're getting. And then he abandoned the numbers and the statistics and the analytics for going overboard with what that his brain trust that he had hired thought was going to work on a mainstream basis on national TV, which was indie fucking wrestling. Bullshit, phony, obviously phony, winking at the audience, phony fucking wrestling. That's what his talent that he chose was mostly expert at, and all their friends. So you went from one polar opposite to the other. Is this yammering from Tony Khan finished yet, or do we have more of it?
No, that's the end of the yammering, but let me ask you a question, because we talk a lot about what separates a booker from a fantasy booker or a E-Fed booker or someone who anoints himself a booker. The idea that every win and loss would matter and will be a legitimate ranking system is a great, optimistic idea. But is that something that a real booker would probably stay away from, especially in the States? Because you're kind of putting yourself into a corner right away.
Yes. And it's another, because the Japanese, in case everybody haven't noticed, Japanese culture and the things that Japanese people like in Japan is, in some cases, very different from the United States. But they keep explicit records because of their tournaments, because, you know, in that aspect, Japanese wrestling, or at least used to be, same things happened over there as over here. It's a bunch of children and fucking idiots. But they were more into the goddamn tournament concept than the United States has ever been, to the point where they can do the A block and the B block and the IWGP, blah, 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 and people are going to follow that. And that ain't going to work here, and especially not on television, because people want to see a bunch of wild-ass fucking heathens trash-talking each other and then believably beating the shit out of each other. There's a reason why Stone Cold Steve Austin was a megastar and Jungle Jack-Off Jack Perry is a cosplaying child. Because one looks the part, the other one doesn't. You would think that Perry, having a showbiz, acting, movie biz background, would understand that. Would he be going out for the part of fucking what's called Mark Kerr in the Smashing Machine, or is that the Rock's fucking deal? Right? Who's going to give him that fucking job?
Now, he would be more concerned with if Donna Martin was going to graduate or not.
Well, there you go. And I just barely know that was a program that fucking, nevertheless. They imagine themselves. Tony has imagined himself and dreamed about this since he was a apparently lonely teenager in the mansion, wherever the fuck they lived. And he wants to desperately to be able to do this. And he loves this shit. And just like Eddie Kingston loves Japanese wrestling. You know what? I love Journey, but if I try to sing like Steve Perry, I bet you I would probably, well, I'd be okay. No, I'd suck.
The fans would take a journey away from the building.
Yeah. Eddie Kingston wants to be a Japanese fucking champion. He wants to be Kenta Kobashi. The fucking Lollipop Guild, the Buckaroos, in their minds, they're goddamn giants of the industry, titans, if you will. With them, it's all about we're going to present ourselves as who we think we are rather than who we can convince anybody else we are. And that's why they've been doomed to failure from the start. Tony didn't realize that he wasn't equipped for this, and I'm sure some people told him. I didn't just yell at him and tell him he was a fucking idiot because he was nice to me, but I quit taking his phone calls because I could tell that there probably wasn't a chance he'd believe me anyway. So he probably didn't believe anybody else. Tony, you did this on the internet when you were in school. What the fuck? You can't. This is national television. And again, the people he surrounded himself with, that there would be no way that they would ever step back and let qualified people run any goddamn thing. And now we found out that 100 million, 150 million, 200 million, whatever the estimates are, about 5 years is how long that you can operate on that before it starts showing up, even with all the money you throw at it. Fucking hell. Somebody, they said, well, Cornette was backed by a billionaire or a millionaire in Smoky Mountain Wrestling, millionaire, keyword being the M. They have already lost. I don't know how Rick Rubin is doing these days, but he's a legendary music producer. But even back in those days, 30 years ago, they've lost more than his goddamn entire worth. They would have put Rick Rubin in bankruptcy court and out on the street. I was a fucking hobby.
But to be fair, when the video game hits, it's going to change everything.
Did you see the tweet of the video game now marked down to $3 in one discount store?
Remember, for a while we weren't hearing about the media rights thing. It was when the video game hits, the investment is going to really pay off because they built an engine, they built a game that is unstoppable, and the AEW fans are going to go crazy wanting to play it. No one's playing it. No one wants to play it. Has a horrible reputation.
The images going around of the guy getting stuck in the ring and not being able to get out and just, it's like quicksand.
The images going around are like more people playing an old TNA video game than playing that. I mean, it's embarrassing, but that was the first thing we were told because we were also told the company would be profitable now if it wasn't for the video game division's sunk cost or losses, whatever you want to declare it to be. Well, they're still losing money, and that video game was a complete bust.
They should have released the video game as a movie because it costs more than fucking Heaven's Gate, right?
You know, the making of that game would probably be a funny documentary as long as they weren't in charge of the footage.
But past the video game, the rights fees, as we've talked about, and we don't mean to beat it to death, but that's still, people can't get it through their fucking heads. That now that it's been a WWE shopped around for everything, right? And they made their decisions. And there's some people that might still want wrestling. Some people don't want wrestling unless it's the big fucking wrestling. But at the price that even now that they're getting from TBS, from Warner Brother, Media, Discovery, whatever the fuck, the price they're getting now was based on they were drawing regularly another couple 100,000 fucking viewers and had names. And now Danielson's retiring. Nobody actually knows Moxley used to be a WWF guy. Punk is gone. Cody's gone. So why would they give them a raise for less stars and lower ratings? They're going to be lucky if they get the same thing. I think they should probably kiss the ground in this fucking environment.
Remember, they got their initial deal, at least according to Tony Khan, because of his friendship with Kevin Riley.
Well, yeah, and he's gone.
And then before he left, because the ratings they said at the time were much higher than they initially thought they would be, I think I've read, and I want to say Dave Meltzer wrote it. Originally, they were expecting 500,000 people, which seems somewhat low. Well, they started a lot higher. They started like 1.5 million or something. which tells you a lot about where they are now. They got a quick raise. And
now, to be fair, they hit that at the start and never did it again. So don't act like they had those for a while and then they lost them. That you got to be fair.
Those are people willing to give it a chance, but the numbers were better initially than they thought they would be. They got an extension and a bump. And then since that time, everything is down. And of course, there's a lot of value for these brands. There's a lot of value for the NBA or the NFL or the NHL even, or MLB, even though some of these deals will lose money for the networks. It's about everything else it does for you. And right now, AEW, what they have going for them is that they are cheap programming for the network. If that changes, who knows if the network sees it the same way? It's cheap programming.
What major sponsor can't wait to get involved with AEW? What major remember they just aired a Domino's commercial at random on the fucking network and they goddamn sabotaged that.
Yeah, they have Ric Flair's Woo Energy. That's what sponsor can't wait to be involved with them. And the network, if anyone from the network goes online, they may see some people loving it. They're going to see a lot of people ridiculing what's ridiculable, if that's a word. Things that are just ridiculous, a bad program, bad booking. Tony Khan is openly mocked. It's not just wrestling podcasts. It's TV shows covering the NFL. Him at the draft and the neck brace. So, at the same...
you know what... I'm sorry, finish. I'm sorry.
At the same time, you have WWE making deals left and right, looking like a big league organization beyond the scandals and everything. Someone will be like, oh, you didn't say anything about Vince. Yeah, we know. But they look like a big-time, real company right now. And you have another company that when they come to your town to try to impress any of the executives, they're going to have no one in the building, a dead crowd, no one who's specifically over or looks like a star. Even if you have these people and you're pushing them, they don't look like stars. Nothing. I don't want to go off on another rant again, but that's...
But you instigated one from me. That's what I was going to say, is that would have been the sports-based presentation of a new wrestling promotion. Make everybody look like they're a professional athlete. Make everybody look like they make money. Make everybody look like they belong on television. Make everybody look like they can conduct themselves like legitimate, experienced performers from the start, instead of having a bunch of outlaw, indie, legless wonders and dog-faced boys and stupid fucking people sticking their hands in their pockets. They could have done considerably. And then, even if they were the secondary brand to the WWE, which, let's face it, they were always going to be. But they could be attractive to sponsors for a younger demographic if the sponsor wasn't tuning in to see some stupid motherfucker drinking somebody's blood, cutting somebody with a pizza cutter, going through the flaming table, whatever all the stupid shit they've done because they can't get out of the rec centers in their minds. That would be sports-based. A brand may want to advertise with this young thing that's cheaper than the goddamn WWE, or I can get a more prominent placement with them. And if any of my customers or consumers or whatever the fucking product or service is, watch this program, nobody's going to think that I'm a fucking idiot for being on it. My product for being on it. There's a goddamn bunch of children fucking slicing each other with razor blades and going through barbed wire. Or fucking stupid, nonsensical shit. Or bad performances from people who should not be on television. That would have been sports-based. Get some fucking professional-looking motherfuckers that can at least get a tan, take care of their body, and take the business seriously. And look like they're being portrayed to be. That would have been sports-based. There's my rant.